The Panthers are on the clock in 8 days. What are they going to do there at 8? Are they going to stay put, move up, or potentially trade back? We'll talk about all that right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching this show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, because I'm back here on Friday one final time before the draft, answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council, or just at me over on Blue Sky at Julian Council to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. And on today's episode of Locked On Panthers, we once again have a guest, Joe Person, the venerable reporter for The Athletic, covering your Carolina Panthers, going to come on today, and we're going to look at what we talked about yesterday in more detail, as Joe wrote about this recently, with Derek Carr, that shoulder being a massive question mark for the Saints, who are drafting behind the Panthers at 9th. What is Carolina going to do? Are they going to move up? Are they going to stay put? Are they going to move back? And if they do, what can they get? And who is the guy he thinks Carolina is going to take? Are they good at receiver? Are they going to take a safety? All these questions coming up right now with Joe Person from The Athletic. All right, back here on Locked On Panthers, and as promised, the venerable reporter of The Athletic, Joe Person, covering your Carolina Panthers. Check him out over on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at Joseph Person. Joe, welcome back to the show, man.
What's up, man? Venerable. That makes me sound old. So, but that's okay. I am old.
Old and respected, if you want to call yourself old, because I never called you old. You called yourself old, but respected, Joe, as obviously you've done a great job covering this team, whether it was with The Observer and then with The Athletic, which you're like an Athletic OG, man. Like, you've been holding on since day one. Good for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a good move. I did not leave The Observer lightly. Like, I had grown up with newspapers. I actually grew up in a newspaper family, but so thought long and hard about it. But it's been good, man. Like, the New York Times buying us was I think good for our business. And anyway, I appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, y'all should subscribe to The Athletic, or do what I do and subscribe to The Times and get like everything, including New York Times cooking, which is just amazing, Joe. I'm not sure if you got, I'm sure you do. That's probably part of the company perks. But let's talk about the Panthers. Let's talk about the draft coming up in 8 days' time, as people be watching and listening to this on Wednesday. Big news. Big Friday news dump by New Orleans on Friday afternoon, as Derek Carr got a shoulder issue that dates back to 2023, an AC joint sprain. Didn't miss time back then, but now there's concern of whether he's going to be ready to go. And New Orleans sits in a position where they could take a quarterback, whether it be Shedeur Sanders falling to them, or if they want to get crazy, take Jackson Dart. But maybe they might have to possibly move up, and Carolina's in a spot ahead of them where teams that could be interested in Sanders, any other quarterbacks that aren't named Cam Ward, could jump in front of New Orleans. So how do you think that news impacts Carolina potentially with the 8th overall pick?
Yeah, it could be really big. I mean, as you said, for all those different scenarios, and heck, even the Saints possibly moving up ahead of the Panthers, which even I do think that Dan Morgan, and I put this in that piece you referenced, I do think they're very interested and open, I should say, to moving back. I mean, the trick would be, up until now, most of the buzz, though, has been that there's not many teams interested in coming up in this particular draft, because it's sort of, there's a leveling. I think Jason Light called it, it's a leveled out type of draft, where there's a lot of similar talent more later in the first round into the second and third. And so it's not anyone like your Gaga to come up for. Now, obviously, quarterback could change things. And so is that Pittsburgh, as they try to figure out, assuming Aaron Rodgers is going to sign with them, is it just kind of a 1-year rental? And might they be interested in Shedeur Sanders, who visited Pittsburgh? Possibly, although their history has not been to make those sorts of big moves up the draft board. So
yeah,
I don't know. If nothing else, it feels like a quarterback going, and this is obvious. If a third quarterback gets in there, then that's just one more player that a non-quarterback that falls to the Panthers. It would not surprise me if the Saints, though, are able to sit there at 9 and take one of those quarterbacks.
Yeah, and that's what I've wondered even before that news came out, because I know, like, New Orleans, there's still maybe Aaron Rodgers could be something that they could look at this point in time. Yeah. I don't know how interested Atlanta is in doing an inter-division trade by sending Kirk Cousins there, but that could be a possibility for them. Right. I think probably unlikely. So we got to figure out what happens with those two guys. But I always felt like, dependent upon like what happened with Shedeur Sanders, could impact maybe what Carolina was able to do at 8. Because Cam Ward, apparently he's going number 1 to the Titans. Browns, Giants, 2 teams that you say need a long-term quarterback option that probably aren't that interested in it. Patriots already have Drake May. Jags got Trevor Lawrence. The Raiders, they signed Geno Smith. So maybe possibly Shedeur could sit back there for a couple years, but I don't know if that's what Pete Carroll wants to do. The Jets don't seem to be all that interested in. Of course, Carolina at 8, like, they don't need a quarterback. So it does come down to, does a team like you mentioned, like Pittsburgh, who it would be outside of their nature, want to move up and potentially do that? So I feel like he might be the key. And like, what teams are that interested in Shedeur to kind of where Carolina ends up doing there at 8?
Yeah, I'm with you. And I don't know, just the more you start hearing things like Peter Schrager this week, who I'm working on another piece on mock drafts. And guys around the league really respect Peter Schrager, like teams do. And here I am blowing up a competitor. But I know Peter. Anyway, Peter put something out Monday of this week that said that he thinks media are a little higher on Sanders than teams. Okay. And that he would not be surprised if he falls past the Saints and has to kind of wait it out on that first night of the draft. And that's why I was saying earlier that as much fun as it is to talk about this, and I do think a trade back really would suit the Panthers well, I just don't know. I wonder if the Saints are able just to sit there at 9 and take a Jackson Dart. They had the Louisville quarterback in last week. Schuff, I think's how he pronounces his name. At any rate, and that's not terrible for the Panthers either. As I pointed out in that same article, they've had a real good success rate picking at 8. I mean, Jordan Gross, McCaffrey, J.C. Horn, and then the original OG, who not at the same level, those 3 guys, but Tim Biakabatuka, who had a couple good years before he got hurt. So I don't know. I don't think it's the worst thing to sit there and take a top 10 pick.
Yeah, Tyler Shuck, the quarterback from Louisville. That's somebody, I saw. Yeah, the Dart thing's interesting. After watching him in the last couple of years, like, I thought he was a good quarterback, obviously, at Ole Miss. I cannot foresee him going the top 10, but who knows? And you do bring up a good point about Sanders and the media portion of it all, because, like, Colorado was getting hyped up a couple of years ago, and that very clearly was not a good football team, even when they had that 3-0 start. Like, they beat up on a bad Nebraska team coached by former Panthers head coach Matt Rule, beat up a TCU team that had won the national championship the year prior, but lost pretty much every player you knew about from that national title team. And then once the rent came due, we saw that was a 4-8 Colorado team. And, like, I give him credit. The dude's tough as hell. I mean, they played in the bowl game, if that matters. I know a lot of guys opt out nowadays, but he went out there, played his competitor. But the fact that his last name is Sanders and who his dad is, that probably buys into more of the hype than really what he has done talent-wise, because good player, but not the greatest arm, not really physically dominating, things that you would like attribute to typically a guy who's going to go in the top 10. Now, of course, Bryce Young, that's someone who did go number 1 overall. And you would not say that he's a physical talent, such as a guy of obviously like Josh Allen, which is not the best comparison. But let's take a quick pause, because I do want to ask you what you think Carolina is going to do there as far as if they stay, who you think they're going to take. So we'll take a quick pause, come back here in just a moment with Joe Person from The Athletic. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip: add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Joe, everyone wants to know. We'll find out officially in 8 days' time what Carolina's going to do there at 8. I have seen every single mock draft seemingly the last couple of weeks, whether it's Mel Kiper Jr., whether it is Daniel Jeremiah, who also has given me a pick that I was kind of surprised by, Matt Miller, Jordan Reed. The vast majority are saying that Jalon Walker, the Salisbury native from the University of Georgia, is going to be the pick at 8. Who do you think right now Carolina is going to take with that 8th overall pick?
That's the way I'm leaning to. And I actually, at the combine, I was thinking, I left the combine thinking he was the pick. Then I started hearing some things about like, well, the size as an edge rusher isn't ideal, but I don't know. I think the Panthers really like him for a couple different reasons. One, his football IQ and, his character stuff is off the charts. Grew up. As his dad was a Division II coach and was an assistant coach, I think. Yeah, assistant at Western Carolina. Anyway, the kid's got great football acumen, but he also can play really well. Now, is he going to be like, a 15 sacks guy at edge rusher? I don't know if he'll do that, but it just seems like he is a guy that can make plays at all three levels, even in coverage. If you're drafting him that high, though, you better feel pretty good about his edge rushing and pass rushing skills. And, I think if they take him, then obviously, Dan Morgan thought he can make that move. We didn't see it a lot at Georgia. More of an off the ball linebacker, and he made a lot of plays, Julian, but just not what the kind of plays we're talking about getting after the quarterback.
Yeah, and he won the Buckus Award for the most outstanding linebacker in college football. So clearly, he's a great player. And we've seen plenty of those guys come from that Georgia system under Kirby Smart, whether it be, Trayvon Walker down there in Jacksonville, went number 1 overall, didn't have a ton of production, but looks like a pretty doggone good player as they're going to pick it the 5th year on him. And there's other guys, even like Quay Walker up in Green Bay with the Packers, who's played well. Nakobe Dean, who was part of those title teams, who had good numbers, but still was questions about his size. You can't really question a lot of these guys as far as once they get to the league, the Georgia players for the most part. There's been some like Lewis Seen who didn't work out there in Minnesota or anywhere else so far in the league. I am curious because edge rusher is a spot that I think that they should be looking at 8. And Walker said his pro day, a lot of guys are versatile, but not a lot of guys can do multiple things well. I can do that. He can play off ball like he primarily played at Georgia. He can play at the edge in this scheme. And it may be the last year of Ejiro Rivero. How would you foresee them actually utilizing him? Would he actually be primarily an off-ball linebacker, or do you see him more in that outside linebacker room, at least as far as a rookie coming up here in 2025?
I could see him playing off-ball on, first 2 downs, and run downs. And then maybe you move, one of their edge guys inside, like Clowney, if you want to do what back when Rivera was here, what they call it, the NASCAR, where they had that they would pop a big guy inside and let him rush over defensive tackle. So anyway, I don't know. That would be the way I would envision it. As I said, I don't think he's going to like line up and play 50 snaps at edge. I think he'll be used if they draft him. Caveat.
Do you think he'd be kind of like a Luvu type? I'm curious about that.
You just took that comparison out of my mouth, but yeah, but probably a little more on the edge than Frankie was. Frankie would go out there from time to time, but I think that's a terrific comparison. And we're not having this conversation probably if they had re-signed Frankie Luvu, but they didn't. So here we are.
And this because obviously you're a reporter and all that, but like Luvu decided not to come back to Carolina. Understand that, and he went to Dan Quinn's scheme and obviously played well, kind of like that Micah Parsons role that Micah played in the same scheme down in Dallas. Wouldn't that be kind of concerning that a player who would be kind of in a similar role that you already had a former player in Luvu coming in and just seeing how he was utilized and then Luvu not wanting to be here? Would there be any kind of like maybe, second thoughts about that?
I'm glad you brought that up. I think that narrative on Frankie Luvu not wanting to be here was not accurate.
Okay.
Here's how I understand how that situation went down. The Panthers made an initial offer that wasn't as good as the Commanders, and I think Frankie and his representation kind of like, whoa, this we've got a pretty good offer on the table. And the Panthers kind of, as I understand it, came back and either matched it or even offered him a little more. But I think they were just too far down that road with Washington. I mean, I suppose they certainly could have switched gears at the 11th hour, but I think that narrative that, he hated the scheme was not the case. As near as I can tell, he does a lot of the same things in the Washington scheme with Dan Quinn. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
Well, no, I mean, I appreciate you clearing that up because plenty of people have the feeling that Louisville's like, oh, well, this is not really work for me. I'm going to go with a different DC, a different scheme. And obviously it played out well for them as they went to the NFC title game, and he was great.
Yeah, as I said, I think they offered him a lot of money initially than the Panthers. And by the time the Panthers came up, which they did, I think that, again, if not Frankie, then certainly the agent was like, well, we got this thing sewn up with Washington.
And we see every year with the legal negotiating period, those deals happen so fast. So there doesn't really seem like there's a lot of time for negotiating.
That's right.
Like 2 more I got for you here. Receiver. Dave Canales came out a couple weeks ago at the owners meeting down there, Palm Beach at the lovely Breakers Hotel, which you and I cannot afford, unfortunately. But he was saying that they felt like they had that. Well, maybe you can afford it, John. I don't want to speak for you. But they said he feels like
I can afford to go and cover the NFL meetings there and stay at the courtyard at the Palm Beach airport. I can afford that.
There you go. Get those Bomb Boy points.
Yes.
But Dave was asked about the need, if there is a perceived need for a wide receiver one, a true top-tier receiver. DK Metcalf was the kind of guy people thought would have made sense for Carolina because of the ties the staff has Seattle, that Morgan has Seattle, and their general manager, John Snyder. Of course, that does not work out. He goes to Pittsburgh. And now the question is, do they need to get one in this draft? But Dave says that they feel like they have one in Xavier Legette. With the top 4 guys from a year ago coming back, do you feel like this team, like the way that they feel that they're good at that receiver spot, that they're not going to be looking, whether it be at 8 or really at 54, 74 there in day 2, that they're not really looking for a receiver that early?
Yeah, I do think they want another speed receiver.
Okay.
And I understand what, Canales is, has his guys back, so to speak. And they should be, you can't punt on Xavier Legette right now, just yet. I mean, and hopefully never. I mean, if he develops like I think he can, but I do think, I think it's pretty safe to say they're planning for Adam Thielen to retire after this season or be gone because, they gave him a raise and did not extend him. And I don't think either side really wanted the extension. So I again, maybe not at 8 and maybe not even on the second day. The guy I really kind of have a draft crush for is Jaylin Noel for Iowa State.
Iowa State, yeah.
Just because he is so sudden and he also is a returner, and not that that's high on the list, but it's on the list. With these new kickoff rules and just. Yes, they brought back Raheem Blackshear, but I think they could stand a receiver who could help out there. But at any rate, I like Noel. I don't think he'll be available at the time when they might start looking for a speed receiver.
Yeah, and Bruce Feldman, your colleague there at The Athletic, he was on with Ryan Russillo, I think like a week or so ago, and that was a name that he brought up that a lot of NFL people really like as far as one of the slot receivers, and that's been a position in recent years that has been one that people are really trying to acquire as you can find those mismatches there defensively. But last one for you, safety. Dan, you go back since Dan Morgan's taken over, he's always been pretty transparent of like what they need to do. He said this offseason, obviously we got to fix the defense, and they spent a lot to try to do just that. He talked about last year too, offensive line, and they went out there and did it. And he mentioned during his pre-draft press conference that safety is pretty thin. You got 3 guys there as of this recording: Nick Scott, Trevon Merrick, who they brought in as well during free agency, and then Damani Richardson. So safety, that clearly is going to be a spot. Is there a name or a time where you think that they're probably going to try to attack that?
Yeah, I think it'll be the second day of the draft. I really do.
Okay.
Just because of what you said. I mean, I was playing around with some of these different scenarios in my last mock. I just wanted Jaylin Noel. I wanted to make that work, and I just kept saying, but then what about safety? Because then you kind of kick safety down the road another round, and the list gets a little leaner. I don't know. They had the Virginia kid Jonas Sanker in for a top 30 or for a 30. Xavier Watts, another draft crush of mine, Notre Dame. I mean, I think that you mentioned Morig. They've got the in the box, run stopper. I think they need a ball hawk, and Xavier Watts was it. I mean, 13 interceptions the last 2 years for the Fighting Irish. It's been quiet. Like, if you pull up their 30 visits, like, he's not on there, and there's really no mention of him meeting with the Panthers anywhere. And so you start wondering, like, maybe they're keeping that quiet, or maybe they think like Jonas Sanker in the 3rd round. Sanker's very good. Like, his numbers are great too. It doesn't seem like he is like an attack the ball kind of guy the way Watts is. So I don't know that I don't know. Might be another safety, that we don't know about, but those are a couple to watch.
Yeah, the last time I checked, they had Nick Emanwari. They went down to the pro day for South Carolina, and he's not going to be available for them unless they take him at 8, which I don't think is going to happen. And then Sanker from Virginia, as you mentioned, came in for a 30 visit. Other than that, there's no other safeties. There's only one corner, Quincy Riley from Louisville. And I haven't looked back at this in a couple of days, so maybe that's changed. But they have not been apparently super interested in some of those guys, especially, safety, where they're clearly probably going to take somebody. So they're probably keeping it quiet, as you mentioned. But, Joe, appreciate your time here on the show. Enjoy some time off. With the draft coming up, you got spring break across CMS, so get a little away for a little bit before the craziness going on in Green Bay next week. But appreciate you. Check him out again on Twitter at Joseph Person. Subscribe to The Athletic or the New York Times. Get a bang for your buck there, and check out all the work that he does as a great reporter for the Carolina Panthers. Joe, really appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, man. Always appreciate you having me on, man.
Of course. Take a quick pause. Come back and wrap up the show here on Locked On Panthers. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Big shout out to Joe Person of The Athletic for joining the show and giving us some insight there. And it sounds like it's going to be Jalon Walker. When you're hearing it from Mel Kiper Jr., from Matt Miller, Jordan Reed, sometimes from Daniel Jeremiah, who did have Mason Graham up there on a recent mock. But I think his most recent mock, he has Jalon Walker going to Carolina. When every single reputable mock draft person out there, and one of the top Panthers reporters is out there saying the same thing and feeling coming to the combine, he was going to be the guy. And apparently there's a private workout coming out here tomorrow on Thursday where the Panthers will be down there checking out both Jalon Walker and Mykel Williams. And it's going to be Dan Morgan there as well. That appears to be the pick. And to me, it's not just the fact that he can be an edge rusher, that he can be an all-ball linebacker, that he won the Butkus. It's the culture part of it. It's everything that Joe talked about there, about his leadership and everything about his football IQ. That's what makes it seem like he's ideally the kind of player that Dave Canales and that Dan Morgan wants. Clearly, he's a dog. He played at Georgia. And not just because he was a Georgia Bulldog, but like when you watched him play, dog. And when you watch the games against Texas, I know I bring him up a lot of times. You're like, okay, whatever. You've heard it over and over again. Y'all, to dominate the way that him and Mykel dominated Kelvin Banks and Cam Williams, like that, those are the kind of guys you're going to see on Sundays, especially Banks. Like those are the kind of guys you're going to have to win those one-on-one battles with. And when we had the Locked On Georgia host, Clint Shamlin, on a week ago, and Clint's talked about when guys like the Kobe Dean and other Philadelphia Eagle, Georgia Bulldog alums are going down to Athens, and they're hearing about him throughout the building. Like, that's the kind of guy that they want here in Carolina. It's great that he's able to potentially play off ball, play edge, be in a Luvu type of role. And thank you to Joe for clearing up that narrative that's been out there that Luvu didn't love the scheme, that he wanted to leave. That it's pretty much was just too far down the road. Took money from Washington. They gave him more originally. Carolina came in, but it was too late. They had plenty of time prior to then, as Luvu was a Panther and was going to be a pending free agent, to get that deal done, but they did not do it, losing arguably their best defensive player from that season ago. So we'll see how things play out, but I have been on Jalon Walker for a while, and it's been based off of the need that he fills, all that's been written about him, as it's basically like almost lore at this point in time, the kind of young man he is. And hell, he's a North Carolina guy like me. I think he might be from South Carolina originally, but he's a North Carolinian at this point in time. So we'll see how it plays out. But Joe thinks that's what's going on. And a couple of years ago when we had Joe on the show, he thought J.C. Horn was going to be the guy, and J.C. Horn ended up being the guy. So we'll see what Carolina does there with the 8th overall pick, as there's still something to figure out there with the Saints. Whether they're going to do a quarterback, is it going to be Aaron Rodgers? I doubt it's Kirk Cousins, but you cannot forget about that possibility for not just the Saints, but for Pittsburgh, another team that might be interested in trading up to 8 to get ahead of New Orleans. New Orleans indeed wants to take a quarterback in this year's draft. So going to break down more of that throughout the rest of these next 8 days leading up to the draft here next Thursday night, round 1 in the NFL draft up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, because I'm back with you on Friday, answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. And so this is what you got to do. Either at me or DM me over on Twitter, or at me over on Blue Sky to get those questions into me right now. Do not delay. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Thursday.